the illustration here. So why do I have this illustration here? I guess I have a couple reasons. Let's just talk about that first. You already know the title. I'm not gonna read that again. And first of all, the budworm, this is a parasitoid attacking the budworm. So parasitoids was believed, well, I guess is believed to be a driving factor of the budworm population. So it's quite an important link into this whole budworm system. So that's one reason I have this. And the other reason is I actually did some study on parasitism. Maybe I have one paper or maybe two papers on that, but I'm not presenting those papers today. So if you're interested into the parasitism, of course, you're welcome to check out my paper. And also, I hope you get excited about this because, if you look at this illustration, well, by the way, this is done by CFS entomologist Rob Johnson in New Brunswick, not my work. And but if you look at the illustration, you see, it's very powerful scene, really. The wasp really probably beating its wings like 1,000 times a minute, trying to, keep in the spot, keep in that right time to execute this perfect hunt. This is really no difference than you're seeing, a cheetah hunting a wildebeest in Africa. So if you'd only get excited on that, but not this, that's probably just, discrimination against the people doing, study in a small system. And should be excited. And okay, let's go on. A little bit introduction about myself. I try to keep it short. My boss suggested I should just talk about something about my academia path. So I don't know if people are interested in this. So I just take a snip of that's the CV, the educational part of my CV. I guess the audience mainly are graduate students. So if you're interested in what I have done in my undergrad and graduate program, that's the places. So in my undergrads, what I did is really the first picture. That's what I learned. That's what I did in the undergrad program. I'm landscape architecture at that time. Not too much related with forestry and ecology. Then moving on with the masters, the first masters, I did silviculture and propagation specifically. And by accident, I did, a second master. Well, I guess I can talk a little bit about that. And it's supposed to be a exchange type of thing. Then I can get 2 degrees at the same time. But I guess some accident, I didn't plan it well, I guess. So I get the master's after that. So if you are a master's program, I think, there might be some opportunities as well. And I think it's called, one of the program is called Transatlantic. I don't know, there might be some faculty members who knows that or manage that. So basically you can do some exchange program, a term or 2 terms in one of those European schools. And it will be a cool experience for you. And the PhD, and for this master's, it's mainly I did growth and yield study in forestry. And the PhD I did in University of New Brunswick in Fredericton. And today I'm presenting basically it's one part of my PhD study. So I'm not going to talk too much right here. Let's just move on to the budworm. So this is normally the time I ask a show hand to ask the audience if I do this in person, like who has ever seen budworm or the insect or the damage. I guess most of us probably has never seen it, but every time there's always a couple, boomers, they probably say, yeah, we have seen it all. And because, the budworm comes back every like 30, 40 years. If there are some old fellas, they see that they have seen it, probably the guys, pushing to their retirement. So this is 2016 on the border between New Brunswick and Quebec. So that's when the moth start to coming down from the north shore of Quebec and moving down south and expanding south. And this is a scene they took in a gas station, obviously. And I bet if you see this in St. John's one day, you're probably gonna remember the budworm, spruce budworm as an insect, for a lifetime. And it is new to us. And it's not really new because, you know, similar photo that was on the windshield, but this is a similar place in 1956 on a Bank of Nova Scotia. I guess it's called Scotia Bank right now. So you can see the budworm moth, they are covering the door panels. And on the right, the illustration that shows you the in the 1970s outbreak, you know, the coverage of the insects in the eastern part. So Newfoundland obviously is part of the outbreak area. So what's the situation now? So this is the situation now in Newfoundland. Let's just talk a little bit more about this. So if you look at 2016, I'm not sure if you can see those kind of really faded gray points on the west coast. So that's the places where they sample the L2, the budworm lava instar, the second lava instar stage. So they sample the population density in each of those sampling points. In 2016, those grayish color means they didn't detect any traceable population. And the 2016, 2017, kind of similar, I guess they even reduced the sampling points because they didn't really detect anything before in 2016. In 2018, if you see, they start to detect some low to moderate defoliation around the gross 1. And 2019, you can see it's really expanding the territory. 2020, well, those shaded areas in 2018, 2020, 2018, 2019, those are the predicted population. I guess generally they just put a buffer around the high population area. So 2020 map, you don't really see the predicted area, but if you only see those points, the reddish, the more red the color, the higher the budworm density. So 2020, pretty much the whole northern peninsula is covered by the budworm, and except the middle part, that's a long range barren, there's not many trees. But I bet if they do a predicted area, those shaded area, the whole northern peninsula will be covered. That's just on the lower right corner, that's just an animation to show you how quickly the situation progressed. So this is 2 photos shot by another researcher in CFS in Corner Brook, Joe Bowden, and these are the photos shot on the west coast of Newfoundland. Obviously, you already saw some defoliation, and on the right, that's a budworm pupa. So it is here. Let's talk about general things about budworm. So this is a life cycle of budworm. So it's a 1-year life cycle and a complete metamorphosis. Has 6 instars of level stage. So they lay eggs normally in the summer, late summer, and then quickly they mold it into the first instar larva. And the first instar larva, they can spread a silk on the tip of the branch and blow with the wind, trying to find a spot where they can overwinter. So once they find a spot, they stay there, molded to L2 overwinter. And after the overwinter in the spring, the L2, they wake up from the hibernation, they spread a silk again and try to find a feeding spot. So these are the 2 dispersal events before or except the moth stage. Then from L2, after the overwintering stage, they find a spot to fit feeding spot. Then there they molded to L3, third instar larva to L6, and these are the stage they are causing damage. The main stage they're causing damage, and then after the 6th larva stage, then they do pupae and the moth. And the moth is the main stage. They do a long distance dispersal. They can fly across. I guess they can fly across the water to Newfoundland. That's how far they can go. Hundreds of kilometers. And what are their major host tree species? And if you have learned some forestry courses, it's time to give you a 5-second quiz on Silix. What are the trees here? So obviously, I guess everybody can see the 4th one. That's the black spruce, the brush tip looking tree top. You can see them from far away on the highway. You can definitely identify the black spruce. And but the major hosts, the most preferred hosts are from the very left. That's the balsam fir, and the budworm prefer over mature balsam fir the best. and then the two white and red spruce, then black spruce. And that one is large. Normally it's not a preferred host, but in Newfoundland, in the 70s outbreak, they detect some considerable amount of large defoliation in the middle and eastern part of Newfoundland. That's why I throw it there too. So how the damage happens is the single budworm, especially from L6 to L3 to L6. So they kind of go to the tip of the balsam fir branch or spruce branch. They web the needles together. Then there they kind of consume all the needles and leave all their poops there, and kind of give us individual tree this brownish and reddish color. This is late summer, so they kind of do their stuff, and all the branch tips, instead of the healthy green color, turn into this red and brownish color. And at the stem level, you can see that trees are just changing colors, and the defoliations, that's what they do directly to the trees, to the stands, and then the trees suffering from that will go through growth reduction. They will go through, they will have mortality, and also the regeneration, the cone productions will be infected. And this on top of the top figure, that shows you the natural range of spruce budworm. So budworm is not invasive. It's just a native species been here for a long time. And the bottom figure, that shows you the outbreak cycles every 30, 40 years. If you see the zigzag line on the very left, very right, that's the sampling. These are the sampling data in New Brunswick and Quebec. And these solid lines, these are from historical records. And these dashed lines, these are from the tree ring study. So the arrows kind of indicates where the outbreak, the peak of the outbreak for New Brunswick and Quebec. So basically we know they come back every 30, 40 years, at least in the last hundreds of years. And the outbreak obviously covers a large area. So in the 70s outbreak, it covers like 55 million hectares in Canada. In Newfoundland, I think it's a little bit shy of 5 million, so probably like 4 million hectares. So within this 55. And this is just another way to see a longer time series. So this is a study that has been done in Quebec. So what they did is they extracted the core from the peat and probably like a 3 meter long core, 3 meter long, and they count how many of the budworm macrofossils in the core. And on the x-axis, that's how many of the budworm specimen extracted from the peat sample. And on the y, these are the year before present. So that's right now, and that's like 8,000 years ago. So these three arrows, the red arrows shows you, that arrow is the top arrow that shows you the 70s outbreak. And these are like 7,000 years ago. Must be some sort of outbreak, and we don't know it, but if you see the number, it's pretty high, and there might be some more outbreaks. So if we look at the, compare it to what we know, so that's the 70s outbreak right there, and that's obvious. That's the Christ, born of Jesus, and this is the when the Egyptians built the pyramids, and we don't really know that much really about budworm, and they have been here way longer, way earlier than we know how to sew pants, I guess. But this even 80,000 years, if you look at the Earth, the dinosaurs extincted 66 million years ago. So if I'm going to draw the dinosaurs on this figure, it's probably going to go all the way down, I don't know, to China. Probably that's going to be a very long series of time. So we just know only a little bit, really. But my point is, budworm has been here way longer than we know it. So by that said, is it a problem? Why is it a problem? Because budworm has been here way longer than what we know. And is that an ecological problem, or what is it? So if we look at Newfoundland, that's actually, I'm trying to say this is really just a forestry problem or a money problem. If we look at the the last outbreak in the 70s to 90s. And these are the shaded areas. These are the budworm coverage. The more darker color on the map, that's just more severe damage. So if you look at the figures, numbers here, so there are 4 million hectares covered by budworm, and that's like 90% of all the productive forests in Newfoundland. And this coverage is bigger than all other disturbance combined, fire, other insects, wind throw, anything combined is still less than the budworm coverage. And if you look at it, nowadays we have the productive forest the area is actually smaller than 4 million hectares, it's only like a 3.8 million hectare. That's what we have right now, that we just have 3 million hectares of productive forests. And if we look at the volume, the wood production, so in the last outbreak, there's a totally 51 million cubic meters that was lost to budworm. That's 30% of the total standing volume. Basically, that was as whatever you have the softwood in there in the woods, 30% of the volume we have is lost to budworm. And at that time, that was 25 years of timber supply. We lost 25 years of timber supply to budworm. And if we look at our current annual allowable cut in softwood annual allowable cut, this is a 2016 to 2020. And if you don't know forestry much, annual allowable cut is basically calculates how much wood we can extract sustainably within the planning period, and give that to every year. So every year, how much wood we can sustainably harvest from the forests. And nowadays we set it to 2.7 million cubic meters. And if we're gonna see a similar amount of defoliation and damage in the 70s, this is still like 20 years of our timber supply is gonna be lost to budworm in the future. So it's quite a impact on market, on the industry. The mill's gonna shut down, jobs gonna lose. That's why it's a problem. If you talk to the minister, he probably just want to know, how much damage and we're gonna have to this and how we can mitigate that. So it is a money problem. It's a human problem. Without humans, probably not a problem at all, really, because that's just nature cycles. It's all a nutrient. Ecologically, I don't think it's a big issue. So what can we do? Obviously, we can spray. This is what traditionally do. If we see bugs, we spray the thing, kill them. So in the 70s, that's the DDT era, or even before that. So Newfoundland, we didn't spray too much. I guess from what I read in the reports and papers, feels like the government didn't react fast enough. So they start to spray, I guess in 1977. So the outbreak started in 1972. I guess they decided, it's kind of too late to spray, so they didn't really spray much. In comparison, New Brunswick sprayed like 70% of the forests, and obviously, DDT as a broadband insecticide kills everything it touches. So it's a major problem environmentally. And nowadays, the DDT, we don't use the DDT anymore. We have this new biological insecticide called Bacillus thuringiensis. So BTK, normally known as. The other one is a tabufenoside. Commercially, we know it as a mimic. So they are kind of less harsh to the environment, so we can spray them. But the problem is the cost. At the DDT era, to spray a hectare is cost like half a dollar. But now with BTK and mimic, it's like $60-$70 a hectare. Really, we cannot spray over a large area. The other option is we can do salvage. So basically, the trees get defoliated. It has some time to. We get some time before they die, so we can extract them from the woods and use the wood. But the problem is, if we extract too much amount of wood at a short period of time, that's going to flood the market. So this is an example. This is the wood pile in the Scandinavian country is caused by a hurricane. So this pile is like 2 kilometers long and probably like a 4 or 5 story building high. So this amount of wood is going to flood the market and cause quite a big disturbance to the market. And this probably to consume this pile has to consume them in a couple of years. So that's one problem. So what else can we do? That's the, everybody is trying to solve this big question, can we do something else to the budworm problem? So that comes the early intervention strategy, and this is currently what is running in the Atlantic provinces, in Newfoundland as well. So what does it basically say is, because in the last outbreak, we do all the study in the declining phase. This is naturally outbreak, started, then peaks, then declines, right? So in the last outbreak, because all the researchers, the funding, everything comes when the budworm really, we start to notice the budworm. And that's the first time really we do systematical and intense study on this insect. So everything pretty much happens at the top and the declining phase. So for this new outbreak, because we know it's gonna come in, we detect it in Quebec, it happens in Quebec. So we're trying to do something in the building phase. That's why we call it an early intervention strategy here. So we're trying to do something here, say we detect a hotspot, we spray the hotspot, whatever we can do. If we can do something in this phase, so hopefully we can suppress the population increase and it's never gonna raise to the outbreak phase. That's the hope, right? And show some promising signs in New Brunswick, maybe Newfoundland too, but we really don't know the big answer really. So that's why also comes my the hardwood story is one of my paper is from my PhD study. So why the hardwood matters. So this is the typical landscape we're looking today. Still in Canada, we are still doing a clear cut system, right? And that's the most efficient type of forestry operation in terms of planning and operation. So, but it's not like we're seeing a continuous cover, endless cover of fir and spruce. If we really look at the landscape, it's kind of more like this illustration. We have different stand types: hardwood, mixed wood, fir, spruce. They are kind of all intertwined with each other. Then we have all these ecological theories applied in the system. We have buffer zones along the creek, along the water bodies. We have patches, corridors connecting the patches, group of retention trees, high stumps of dead trees, fallen trees. And the concept is we provide habitats for everyone, everything, insects, riparian species, and everything. So it is very important. We should to understand the budworm outbreak in this really diverse landscape, rather than thinking our landscape is just endless cover of spruce and fir. So the question comes naturally. So if we have a pure balsam fir stands, and we have another stands balsam fir mixed with hardwood, so are they going to, the balsam firs here or here, are they going to receive the same amount of defoliation when budworm outbreak hits the landscape? If this here receives 80% of defoliation, the balsam fir receive 80% defoliation, what about the balsam fir here? Are they going to receive 80%? So to look at it more quantitatively, so we ask, if the balsam fir receives, say, 80% of defoliation, what about the balsam fir mixed with 30% of hardwood or mixed with 60% of hardwood? To answer that question, why we have this question, there are two ecological mechanisms governing this. So it's not like we just imagine it out. So we have some theories behind this. That's why we have the question. But those, I'm not going to go too far into the theories. We just focus on the forestry aspect of right now. So that's what I did. So I set up the sample plots in the Gaspé Peninsula. So that's the time. This is kind of like the Western Newfoundland at that time. So the budworm population are all here on the north shore of Quebec. They are expanding their territory to the south, kind of like the west coast of Newfoundland. We're just start to see a budworm population, and it's progressing east. So what we have is 27 plots, 9 plots in 3 of this stand type, the categories. More hardwood, we call it a hardwood stands. Some mix, we have a mixed wood stands, and more pure balsam fir, we call it softwood stands. So we do all kinds of study in these 3 stand types and do the comparison. So what we did is we sampled the branches from the top mid crown of the balsam fir tree. So once we get the branches down to the ground, it looked like this. So these tips are defoliated by the budworm. So we compare to a natural needle arrangement and determine how much percentage of defoliation it happens. So then we average it out to get the defoliation value. So what we are seeing here, that's the result, is for the 5 years I have sampled. So on the x-axis, that's the hardwood content from 0% to 100%. On the y-axis, that's the defoliation of balsam fir. So 2012 is basically that at the very beginning, if you remember this illustration of the outbreak, how outbreak starts. So 2012 is probably like somewhere here. It's not yet started yet. And 2013 and 2014, we really start to see the budworm increase. This is probably the building phase. Then 2015, it start to go to the peaking, go to the peak. So what we are seeing here is it's quite a significant effect. The more hardwood you have in your stands, then you have less defoliation. But you know, they work differently among each year, right? At the building phase, we are looking at 2013 and 2014, you probably see a much stronger effect if you see the slope of the curves. But when it's really picks, when the outbreak really picks, this effect from hardwood start to diminish. And so now here we look at like 3 models, right? So let's just talk about the 3 models first. So the A model, which is this figure, let's just look at the models first. This A model, the most simple model, this is actually developed in the 70s, and this is what currently used to support to aid decision support. So it's basically says if you have a stand with say 30% of hardwood, and the defoliation in the pure softwood stands is 100%. All you need to do is, you know, subtract 20% of the defoliation. So 20% hardwood, 20% less defoliation, 50% hardwood, 50% defoliation. This is what has been used even currently. And this has been developed in the 1990s, where they sampled a kind of similar study, but they sampled a declining phase of the outbreak. And this is the model I just showed you in the last figure. So we used 2 variables. Beside this hardwood percentage, we use a defoliation of softwood to kind of indicate the outbreak severity. So we use this to build a GLM model. This is the middle figure. And then we use a random forest machine learning model. And this has 11 variables. This is a C. So this figure you see is on the X, that's the measured defoliation. And on the Y, that's what's the prediction from the model. Obviously, the simple model that built in the 1990s has an R of like 70%, 77%. Then if we add another variable indicating the outbreak severity, we increase the accuracy about like 10%. And with more variables, obviously you have a more accurate model, but you know, at the point probably it's not worth it because you know you have to play with 11 variables instead of 2. So yeah, so this is the output from the random forests model. Basically, it listed the importance of the variables, the 11 variables. So hardwood percent, not surprising, it's quite important. And also the defoliation of softwood. So basically, we use that to represent the original budworm population pressure, really, for that year. And we can use really the larvae count or the pheromone traps. So anything that can indicate the population pressure in that area. So this is very important, and include that in your model, and they will increase the prediction, the accuracy of the prediction. So go back to the question. Yes. So what we are seeing here, if we ask the question, was 30% of hardwood, what's it look like? 60%, what's it like? So it's almost certain if we have hardwood, then the defoliation will be less severe. And but with 30% or 60% of hardwood, it's not like a simple linear relationship. You have 30% less or 60% less of defoliation. That's how we answer the question. Then to look at it more intuitively, we go back to the imaginary landscape. So 2011, 2012, that's the very beginning of the outbreak, we don't see much. The landscape looks all healthy. You can go there, do your hiking, fishing, all the stuff, and no budworm, no worries. And in 2013 and 2014, that's basically the building phase of the outbreak. So on the map, I just circled out the area of defoliation. Well, this is all imaginary. So the redder the color, the severe the defoliation. So here you can see, hardwood stands, more hardwood. They have less defoliation, no defoliation, and some mixed wood. They have this moderate defoliation, and the pure softwood, they have severe defoliation. That's why the early intervention strategy start to play here. So if we kind of spray the hot spots, so to speak, these areas, so hopefully we can really suppress the spread of the outbreak, then, maybe we will never see these red areas covering other type of stands or the larger area. So that's why, we have this window of opportunity to give it a try. If we miss that window, we go to 2015, that's the peak of the outbreak, all your landscape, everything, doesn't matter how much hardwood you have, you kind of get all this to be severe defoliation. Now we are moving from, a window of a proactive pest management strategy to basically you only have reactive strategies, like you can spray the whole landscape or you do salvage, that's the only options left to us. And what's the key message? Keep it short and simple. I don't even know this, but this is called a KITS principle. Developed by the U.S. Navy in the 60s. Basically, it says, keep it simple. If you design a system too complicated, it's prone to fail. So I try to keep it simple so you can remember something other than, we have a Asian dude studying budworm in the faculty. So these are the things I want to just take home message, let's say. So if we have more hardwood, we will see further defoliation. So if you are a forester, you are a resource manager, you own some sort of forest property, just know that if you only have fir, spruce, if you have hardwood, you will receive fur defoliation when the budworm come to Newfoundland. And if you are doing some sort of a study and modeling in terms of forestry, the fur defoliation decrease with the increasing hardwood content, but it's not always proportional. So it's not like 20% hardwood, 20% less defoliation. It doesn't work that easy. And if we want to accurately predict hardwood effects on the fur defoliation, we need to throw in at least one more predictive variable, which is the outbreak severity. So that's the simple message. And this is the photo from the 50s. This is the base of in northern New Brunswick. So this is a base where they do the DDT spraying. So if you see that, it's called DDT Boulevard. All the workers, they have these tents. And thank you, welcome to the budworm city. It is coming to Newfoundland for sure. And I'd like to take questions.
Great, thanks very much, Bo, for the excellent talk. I think so the way we'll work things right now is if you have a question, please just indicate so in the chat, and I'll call out everyone in order, and you can unmute and turn your camera. Okay, I think Adam has a question first.
Hey, Bo, thanks for the talk. I'm curious, so from a management perspective, do we know what causes the eventual crash? I'm wondering if it's like a density dependent thing. And I'm wondering from a management perspective, if you can get into a situation where, like if you're doing early intervention stuff, is it possible if you don't like kill all the budworm with your early intervention, can you get into a situation where you're just having to perpetually spray? Like you just keep them at like a base level, like lower population, and you're just spraying every single year? And can that happen? And if it does happen, like, is that good?
So you are taking it directly into the theory stuff, and till now there's no agreement, I would say. There used to be, there are still like two camps of theories. One is different terms, we call it epicenter theory, So basically it says, this whole budworm events is resource based. When the balsam fir or the spruce, they accumulate to a certain level, then there's an outbreak triggered by some sort of a climate events, climate conditions. So the outbreaks and it stripped out the resources, then the budworm population crashes. Okay, so naturally this is just the nature recycling its own resources, the nutrition. The balsam fir, they were killed and they were replaced by balsam fir as well as a perennial species. So it's not really a ecological disaster. So basically it's natural. That's one type of theory. And the other theory about the outbreak is it's basically it's a predator prey theory. So if you see in the population ecology course, we probably teach the lynx and the rabbits. So that's type of the thing, that's basically says the budworm population is regulated mainly by parasitoids. That's why I have the illustration on the front page. So it's kind of like doing this catch-up game. So the budworm population goes up, then the parasitoids population start to catch it up. So whatever reason, then the budworm population was released from the control of the parasitoids. Then it will reach a outbreak stage, and then for whatever reason, the parasitoids regain the control of the population to bring it back down. So it's not like we don't have this dynamic. We have this dynamics all the time. So before outbreak, we're just doing an oscillation at the very low level. But when the outbreak starts, this catch-up game they are doing at the outbreak level. So that's why I guess the term we call this theory is a double equilibrium theory or oscillatory theory. So that's another theory we understand about budworm. But really, we don't really know. Like if we are trying to understand how this happens and how it ends, it's just we don't have a definite answer.
Cool, thanks.
All right, Yolanda's next.
Thanks. Hi, Bo. Great talk. I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate the sort of presentation, including some historical perspective and also the excellent drawings. It was very aesthetically pleasing. I'm wondering about what how sort of site level variation across the landscape might explain some of the variation in the intensity of the disturbance after you explain for it based on percents of hardwood versus the conifers. So is a sort of what the foresters would call, a high quality site more resilient or less or more susceptible to defoliation?
That type of study has been done quite intensively in the 70s. They tried pretty much like every other predictive variables. So like soil, site index, and I can't remember other things, probably some climate variables. So what we know is at the very beginning, people trying to test, their early spring cumulative temperature and late summer, especially late summer precipitation, because they believe, the budworm moth, the larva or the pupa, they're going to be washed off by the rain. So they tested those, and then the soil. But comes up at the end is all those predictive variables, they don't really significant. Now we agreed is the most important variable is the species. If it's a balsam fir, and then followed by white spruce, red spruce, and black spruce. So this is a specific order. So to aid forest management decision support, so basically what they do is if balsam fir receive 100% defoliation, then white spruce receives say 70-some%, then black spruce, the red spruce, and then black spruce. So that's the kind of the gradient. That's one factor. The other factor is the age. So any stands, they are over 40, 50 years old, they will be highly prone to the outbreak. But anything younger than, like say 15, 20 years old, they are less of a concern. So these are the two predictor variables. They are kind of, everybody agrees. All the other variables, we don't know. But obviously these are connected with, say, SAT index, right? All the age and the growth stuff. So lots of things we don't know.
Totally fair. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Kelly, go ahead.
Hey both, thanks for that. That was super interesting. What I find most interesting about spruce budworm is kind of like that they're native invaders, like they just reinvade their native habitat every 30 years. And so I guess what I'm wondering is that they're like only in North America, but technically there should be boreal forests in like Russia that could support them. So like, do you know if there's been any introduction at all?
I guess I don't know. I don't know they are in, Northern Europe or, Siberia. I don't think they are there, but maybe they are there. But let me just say this. I wouldn't probably call them re-invasive or, re-invasion, because, they are here. Like if you go to Newfoundland right now, they are, even without outbreak, they are always there. So that's what the double equilibrium theory is. They are just doing the low level oscillatory stuff, the parasitoids and the budworm. They are just, they are still there playing in the woods. But, if we go there, sample them, because the population density is so low, you probably don't really detect a significant amount. So yeah, it's not really invasive, even, locally, domestically speaking. So they are always there, but it's just the population goes up and down. And they're quite natural, really. Sometimes I just always say, if you're just taking your cousin, like say a city boy, into the woods and just say there's a, budworm events in the late summer, well, you just tell them, don't worry about it unless they are working for a meal or something, Otherwise, it's like maple, really, change colors. But maple, you see it every year. It's probably, every 30, 40 years. You get a lifetime chance to see a natural event.
So I guess it's like the extreme dynamics might be what's preventing them from becoming invasive in Europe.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, Sean, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Thanks a lot, Bo. It was a great talk. You have a good way of telling a story. We should get you connected with the nature and L folks. I think be quite a bit of interest. I know this topic and treatment of what to do about budworm is a pretty hot topic out west right now with protected areas and so on. But yeah, great job. I'm wondering, just thinking about the European or other boreal things, I think the balsam fir is only endemic to North America, if I'm not mistaken. So if they're very strict on their host, I wonder if, that's the driving force there. But my question is more about human interactions here. So there's an interest in managing it from a social ecological perspective. I'm wondering, I think about fire and how human activities have, in many cases, we try to suppress it, but then we've provided conditions that allow for these huge fires, right? So I'm wondering, from your perspective, like human activities as a whole, do you think do we facilitate budworm spread, or do we reduce budworm spread?
Yeah, I think, we mentioned the host species. I think I can give a couple of sentences on that too. Yeah, because, there was a talk at a couple of years ago in New Brunswick. They were talking about, yeah, you're right, there's no balsam fir in Europe or some other places, but they were talking about the introduced plant Norway spruce. So it might be less prone to budworm in New Brunswick compared to white spruce. I think what they found, I might be mistaken on that, but I think they found that eventually the budworm, they have attacked the Norway spruce, but probably not as severe as white spruce. But I bet they found it's attacking Norway spruce. So that's, there are plenty of Norway spruce in Northern Europe. So I don't know if it's going to be, if you are trying to send them a gift, I don't know if they're gonna get budworm there or not, but that's just one thing. And for the management perspective, there's that question, like in the past workshops and all that. Some people always ask, because it's this early intervention strategy. People ask, what if it worked? What if the early intervention strategy works and there's no budworm outbreak and it's been there for thousands of years and you just stopped it, and what's going to happen? Because that's the naturally, this is the old dying balsam fir stands. They are just getting recycled by the nature, kind of. So if we stop that, kind of like fire, we accumulated, as Trump said, it's a management failure. It's just always the fuel getting light in the woods and on the floor, forest floor. That's why it's burning. So I don't know, if we stopped this and there's tons of old dying balsam fir stands in the nature, what's going to happen? But it could be a problem, ecologically, I don't really know. But management, just talk about management perspective, because we do deforestation, right? We harvest them. So if the balsam fir, they get really old and dying, we're probably going to harvest them before there is an impacts on the land, on the forestry side. But ecologically, I don't know. If we totally stop the budworm outbreak, what's going to happen ecologically? That's one thing. I kind of, as a to all the graduate students, think about the system you're studying on. This is going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years. Whatever the system you're working on, think about it. If the budworm, you might be doing insect, you're doing riparian stuff, avian communities, it's definitely going to have an impact on that. And also for the next 5 to 10 years, there is going to be jobs, there are going to be funding opportunities for budworm related study because of the budworm. Well, that's why how I get my job, I guess.
Yeah, it's really interesting. No, thanks for your insight. And I wonder, just a quick follow-up, because it's like you're saying, it's a complex system. Like our activities now, we may be removing the older trees that they like to feed on, but maybe we're providing, corridors where they can disperse more easily, or we're reducing their parasitoid populations through our activities as well, right? So it's this like complex suite of human activities, which, it's unclear how it could play out. And when you think about climate as well, right? Thanks.
All right, Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Bo. Really interesting, cool narrative you kind of put together there. I had a question about spraying. So you mentioned, was it tibu?
A mimic fungicide?
Fungicide, yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Okay, so I know that's like a molting hormone mimic. So I'd assume it increases their transformation into the moth stage.
So you're basically asking how it works, eh?
Yeah, and I guess I was curious if you're spraying this mimic and you're increasing this metamorphic like progress and stage, are you increasing their are you making it their dispersal more like favorable? So if you spray sooner, they transform and then they disperse. Are you essentially creating more time for them to travel longer distances?
Okay. So how it works is, I guess, either BTK or the mimics. So they are targeting the larval stage. So the larval stage is after the overwinter, after the winter, the L2, the second instar larva, they find a feeding site, and there they start the third instar, fourth instar, fifth to sixth. So that's the stage they do the damage. And when we spray PTK or the mimics onto the branches, they have to consume them. A mimic as a growth regulator, if the budworm, they consume that, the insecticide, what causes is they stop the budworm to molt. So if they are at the certain stage, say L4, they just keep eating, but they cannot molt to the next stage. So eventually they're gonna die. Well, they are not gonna live forever. It's one life stage, the weather condition and everything. They just stay there for a couple of weeks, do their thing, and they don't move anywhere. The only stage the budworm they do dispersal is the moth. So, but they will never get a chance to morph to the moth stage. They won't even pupate. And the other dispersing stage are the L2, L1, L2, the early instar, the very teeny tiny caterpillars before and after winter. So that's the time they spread a silk and they blow with the wind. They can probably go like, I don't know, 20 meters, 50 meters. That's how far they can go, not that far. And so that's how it works. If they consume that, it's basically, it's not going to aid them to disperse further. That's for sure.
Oh, okay, cool. So, okay, interesting. You think they'd use an insecticide that would almost prevent the defoliation at those stages to like advance their life stages, but yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So we are really, the insecticide, we are not really trying to, well, I guess the goal is not just to kill the budworm, it's mainly to, we call it foliage protection. It's just to protect the trees being killed. And the budworm, they have to continuously, consecutively defoliate a tree for a couple years, then the tree gonna get killed. So if we knock down the population, they can do defoliation in 1 year as much as they want, because they only leave the larva stage is only a couple of weeks. It's not going to kill the tree. So as long as we can keep the defoliation at a certain level, the trees are going to be safe.
Cool, thanks.
All right, Evan, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So thank you. It was a really interesting talk, and about a species there's all sorts of details I knew nothing about. So I'm wondering about it from the standpoint of what if we do nothing? So if we just let the outbreak take its course and then wait for it to recover, how long before those productive forests become productive again? And what are the variables that might influence that? I know Sean's talked about some of them with moose, but that's it. That's my question.
Yeah, thank you. So, in the previous years, years before, when I presented what we can do, that slide, and actually the very first top of the rows, what I did is, the strategies we have. The first one is do nothing. Then I removed that row. So if we do nothing, really, to a ecological standpoint, I would say, my point is it's not going to be an issue at all, because it's just the tree is going to just recycle itself. Old balsam fir, they die, and then the new balsam fir going to regenerate and replace itself. So if we do nothing, the main thing is, on the forester side, the forestry perspective, we're going to have this huge volume loss, which is our industry just cannot take that like 20-25 years of timber volume lost to this insect. That's the thing. And I don't know if you're asking me about what are the variables I think you mentioned to this. I don't know. I feel like it's just really, it's not an issue if we just look at this issue from an ecological standpoint. In terms of succession and all that, I don't think it's gonna change much to our landscape. But all we have records probably like less than 100 years about what happens if we talk about succession. It's probably we don't have a solid proof. But my understanding is it's not an issue at all. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right. Next we can go with Hope.
Sorry, I have an uncooperative baby here who won't let me put her down, so hopefully you can hear me. I've noticed there's a fair bit of fir deforestation on the Avalon already, and I've heard it's from the fir adigid. I don't know if that's the case or not. Somebody might confirm that. But I'm wondering if you've, heard anything about them working to like a cumulative effect, or what that might mean to the spread if there's already a bit of deforestation.
From the L2, the budworm survey, the population survey, I don't think they are there yet. At least from a management perspective, I don't think it's big enough to cause any impacts in terms of the timber volume, the production. So I don't know what you're seeing is that budworm. I hope it's budworm. So if it's budworm, because before this, if there's no outbreak at all, so we don't do any type of survey, especially the branch survey. So we don't know for sure. But as I said, they are always there. The budworm is always there. If you are just looking, if you look for it hard enough, you can see them. But the difference to talk about quantitatively, what we're seeing is if you clip a branch, like 0.5 meter long branch, a balsam fir branch from the mid-crown balsam fir tree, when it's at the outbreak stage, on that tip of branch, you're probably going to see 100 budworm larvae. But without outbreak at the endemic stage, you won't find one. You won't even find one budworm on that one branch. It's probably a couple branches. You may be able to find one or two from like several branches. So that's just the difference between the peak density and the low density. And I don't know what you're seeing. Is that a budworm? If it's budworm, I think because now they are running the citizen science projects, what they do is, well, I guess everyone, if you're interested, what they do is they send out people those pheromone traps. So the pheromone traps, because everyday Joe can do it. So they hide in their woods. So that attracts the budworm moth. So let's give you a more, I guess, in time monitoring venues for where the budworms are across the whole island. So I don't know if the news is related with that, but I think my understanding is the population now is still at the Northern Peninsula, is on the West Coast. Avalon Peninsula on the East Coast, I don't know if it's budworm or not.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was trying to just keep her quiet, but I heard most. What I have seen, there's definitely something killing off fur on the island, on the Avalon. I'm not sure exactly, but you see sort of a swelling at the tips of the branches, which I don't know if you would see that with the budworm. It's at the tips, and yeah, I've heard that again that it's an adigid, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, what I've heard is the adigid gets in and interferes with the flow of sap, and then that's why you get this kind of swelling. So yeah, if the budworm isn't here in the Avalon, there's something happening. It's something that's that you can see, and yeah, just wondering if it might mean that there'd be more feeding on spruce, or it might interrupt in a similar way as a hardwood. Or
yeah, definitely the woody dowgid, they are always there. There are some other insects, and in the 70s outbreak, there are researchers they are talking about kind of these insects are interacting with each other. So say the tree is affected by the dowgid, then probably it's more prone to. But these are like what we know from entomology is, especially the forests in the west. Right? If there's a defoliator working on it, then later on there could be a borer. There's the Calioptras. They probably gonna go eat the stems of the tree, eventually kill the tree. So the defoliator will do the first wave of attack, then the borers will do the second wave. That's their interaction is definitely there. But just in terms of the specific insects on the Avalon Peninsula, I don't know if they're going to interact. That's probably going to be part of my research because I collected also the defoliation data from other insects. If we're going to see some sort of interaction between other insects and budworm, that'd be cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think Sean had a comment as well.
Yes, it's Sean Basquill here. I just wanted to share a situation that was documented and fairly well researched in Cape Breton after the budworm outbreak in the 1970s. And Cape Breton has a national park that's about 1,000 square kilometers, and the park decided they didn't want any spraying, and all of the balsam fir forests around the park were sprayed. And so it was a great opportunity to document how things might differ between the two different scenarios. And there were some fairly predictable outcomes, and also some outcomes that were not predicted. And one of the things that happened was that the level of fir mortality in the national park was fairly extreme. And I think there's even one paper that indicates it's the most extreme documented mortality event of anywhere in Eastern North America. And some of the thought is that the budworm was around, and when it was being sprayed in adjacent areas, then it just compounded the effects in the national park. And so this didn't really have any economic repercussions because it's a national park, but it did have ecological consequences. And one of the things that happened was that it took quite a while for the balsam fir to begin to regenerate, because the budworm densities were so high that after the canopy was consumed by the insects, then they fell down to the lower branches and to the smaller trees and killed them as well. So there was some fir that escaped, and obviously there were trees in the seed bank, but there was a lag, and that obviously resulted in a delay. But one of the other things that was going on at the same time is that there was a hyper abundant moose population in Cape Breton, and no predators of moose. And that was because the wolf was extirpated, and because the national park and some of the surrounding areas did not allow hunting. So that hyper abundant moose population fed on the young regenerating fir and knocked it back. And the results have kind of cascaded to present day several decades later. And now in areas where we would have expected to have a balsam fir forest, 30, 40, or even 50 years old, post budworm, instead, we have large expanses of what are called locally here moose meadows. Basically, it's a kind of ecosystem collapse, and the area that would have been dominated by trees and shrubs is now quite densely covered with grass and forb species, and it's changing the nature of the surface soil horizons as well. So it's kind of an interesting situation. And the thought is that it's also having, eventually now, it's having some influence on the moose population itself, because it's kind of a carrying capacity issue coming into play with a lack of browse species. So kind of interesting, and ties into the question that was phrased earlier.
Yeah, thanks, Zhang. Thanks, Zhang, for mentioning this. And Cape Breton is definitely another area where people intensively studied budworm in the last outbreak. So yeah, there are tons of study was carried out in that area too. And I think Zhang get a very good point. This is similar to what I mentioned before. If you are doing a study, whatever system you are working on related with the forest ecosystem, definitely think about budworm, because in the short term, there's definitely impacts on the system you are working on, whatever the moose or the carbon, it's definitely an issue. Long term, because these short term effects are definitely going to be there. So just think about it.
Cool. All right. I think Adam had one more question as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I'll try and be quick here. So You showed that great figure with the huge home range distribution of spruce budworm, and you mentioned that they're kind of all over the place at low densities. But when there's an outbreak, it's still, at least in Eastern Canada, it still seems like there's like an outbreak wave, and it seems like it comes from Quebec. And so I'm wondering if over the years it's been possible to identify, like location-wise, are there places where the outbreak tends to start? And yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, what is the importance of like moth migrations as part of the outbreak, and what's the influence of like local outbreaks?
Yeah, so that ties back to what I mentioned, the two theories about how budworm outbreak starts, how it falls. So the earlier the epicenter theory kind of, well, I guess the researchers in the 70s and earlier than that, and they observed whatever you have what you have described. You know, there's certain areas the budworm population start to rise and pick, then kind of spread it out to the other areas. Could be Quebec, and I guess we observed in this outbreak is from Quebec. So yeah, that's one theory. And later on, when people are into, well, I guess different camp of people into the other theory, the double equilibrium theory. So what the theory is suggesting is, so the predator-prey cycle happens. There's no epicenter, so there is multiple centers. So there are multiple places they started at the same time, because this, I don't know, they're talking about different effects, but most of that, my personal feeling is they're just speculations. They use alley effects and whatever the theoretical things to support that. So basically what's saying is, multiple locations, they start to initiate the budworm outbreak at the same time. And, you know, it could be in Quebec, could be in New Brunswick, but, you know, it's just there. It's because this predator-prey circle, you know, it's at the right point. So, you know, it depends on what theory you believe more, I guess, and what your data shows better. So you can choose the theory kind of fits your data better. So, you know, that's my answer, really. I don't know. Earlier, we all believe in the epicenter theory. That's basically what we're saying here. You know, one center, then kind of spread out, easier to understand. You know, for whatever reason, you know, the climate and meteorology stuff. You know, they kind of carry the moth to other places. It's a little bit easier to understand. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any more questions? Folks still here? All right. If there are none, then thank you again, Bo, for the talk. It's excellent. And yeah, looking forward to maybe seeing you around next year.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And obviously, if you have a question, shoot me an email. We can talk. And you know, I'm also collecting data. If you work in the forest system, you know, it's good if we can talk and see if we can share any sort of data. Especially, I'm looking for the forest inventory data from the 70s. And if you have that in hands, you know, let me know. We can definitely talk.
All right, great. Thanks again, Bo.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.